Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in again. This is episode 190 of the China Manufacturing Decoded podcast. I'll be your host today. This is Renaud from Sofeast, and I'm together with Andrew, who is often joining us on this podcast. How are you doing, Andrew?
Oh, great. Thank you. I got a little bit of hoarse voice, but other than that, great to be here.
All right. Well, no worries. You come out pretty clear. So today's topic is how supplier quality can be evaluated and validated. Supplier quality, whether you buy some standard off-the-shelf product, whether you develop your own products, whether you manufacture your products or manufacture products for your customers, you always need to worry about supplier quality at one point or another. I mean, as long as you deal with products anyway, you have to worry about the material suppliers, the component suppliers, the assembly supplier if you don't do the assembly and so on and so forth, right? So it's always a concern of so many companies, right? So the the first thing is, why is this even important, right? Why do we even talk about supplier quality?
Right.
So let me ask you a question. Can we say that if you have bad suppliers, your projects will tend to go bad. You will tend to have bad products. Can we say like this? Is that a fair statement?
It sure is, most certainly. I think that when it comes to supplier quality, we are really talking about two aspects of the supplier quality. One is how the supplier itself is actually behaving, acting, and actions that they're taking to support us in a manner that satisfies us as a customer, but also the products that they supply to us are, you know, um, basically best of the best and in terms of quality, and we're not incurring any kind of issues. I think those are the two important parts. It's the supplier's its own actions and in terms of being a quality supplier, and then at the same time, the products and services that they provide to us.
Right, right. Now we say best of the best for the needs of the project, right? So
Yeah,
if some
that's
people,
that's probably right.
yeah, if people listen to us, they're like, well, whatever, Yeah, I just buy some giveaway products, like one-time use that are
Right.
given away,
Toys.
so like quality doesn't matter, blah, blah. Well, okay, but if you have like there are still such a thing as really bad quality that will kill your deals, right?
Correct.
Um, if it's, I don't know, you sell promotional items to a bank, for example, and they give it away in a conference, okay. Well, they still care that, the logo, their logo on the products looks good and is the right color. If it's not, they will refuse to pay you for the products, right? Even though it's, I don't know, a 30 cents one-time use, really simple kind of product, right? So everybody has quality concerns, to keep in mind. And if you are, if you are Apple, or if you are Bang& and Olufsen in like sound products, if you are Rolls-Royce for cars, or even if we just say like premium or luxury, like if you're Maserati or you're Mercedes-Benz, your quality concerns will be much deeper, much wider, right?
Yes.
You will have a lot of dimensions of quality and a lot of ways that things can go wrong, right? Whereas in the very, very, yeah, simplified example I shared before, well, there's one or two things that they care about, and that's it. It's very simple. But still, you have to worry about supplier quality, right? So I think bad supplier quality can kill any kind of deals, can really hurt any kind of business. And again, when we talk about supplier quality, yeah, it's among many dimensions. Maybe we should mention that it's about the dimensions of the products. It's about the colors. It's about all kinds of things. It's about the reliability and durability of certain
Right.
components, right? If it looks good, it feels good, it works well, but after 1,000 cycles, oh, that metal part is start to show some fatigue, and it doesn't work the same way. And then like 2,000 cycles, it breaks easily. It's already all cracked. Well, that's no good. That's not good. Good quality also, right? That's not what you want. As long as you specify it and it's very clear what the purpose of the product is, that is also a dimension of quality, right? So there's a lot of aspects here, right? Now, let's think of when you should actually start to care about supplier quality, right? And what you should do if you buy parts or you buy products to mitigate the risks of supplier quality. So
Yeah.
again, let's start with a simple example, right? You buy a standard off-the-shelf product. I don't know, you buy a toaster that you find on the Canton Fair, and you say, okay, this is good, just like that. Just slap my logo and that's it. Let's go ahead. At what stage do you start to worry about the supplier, right? You start to worry about the supplier once you found the nice sample and you see people on the booth. But the people on the booth, that doesn't tell you much about supplier quality, does it? Right?
Necessarily. Yeah.
Um, so at that stage, you need to look into this. We'll come to that later in this episode. Now, if you actually develop your own toaster from scratch because you wanted to, I don't know, you have like a robotic arm that's going to go down and grab the piece of bread and take it out instead of using springs to pop it up. I'm making stuff up, who knows, right? I'm sure we'll see something like that. Maybe it already exists,
Eventually,
right?
eventually, yes.
Right. And maybe it takes the piece of bread, like turns it around, so it's like toasted in different way. Anyway, um, or maybe it only toast on one side, not the other side if you want. Right. There's a lot of things one could imagine. So you want to develop that. When let's say you have a quality function in your company, maybe in that quality department, maybe there's two people working on supplier quality.
Right.
When will they start to be called, to look at that project? When will they start to be involved?
Well, I think that when it comes to designing your product from scratch, you're probably going to have several points where you're going to go
Mhm.
back to quality side of things and check things. Right at the front, up front, you want quality parts. So, but you also need what they call primary part that is basically we know it's going to work for the initial prototype. And so designers typically already have some parts in mind and they want to talk to suppliers that can actually produce these parts. And at that point, honestly, I don't think they don't even think about price so much. Some of the design engineers don't even think about quality so much at the beginning. They're thinking, okay, if
Right.
is this part going to work? Is my project going to work or not? And so usually they push all that work, like you said, to either quality engineer or purchasing. And, as you know, although we have a lot of very knowledgeable and experienced purchasing teams that they have worked so much with quality and testing and reliability teams. So they kind of have gotten an idea of what needs to be done. They don't know the details of it, but they can't generate those test plans and so forth. But they know that, okay, some kind of a test is needed, for example. So usually these teams, in terms of quality and purchasing, sometimes a reliability team as well as design engineer, they get together and they have a meeting. Okay, what's our requirements? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Typically, every new project right up front has a PRD, product requirements document. And that's when, they refer to that and it talks about,
Mhm.
for example, features, performance, look and feel of the project, and also quality and warranty and reliability and such. So in this document, that's where they find all the information they need in terms of quality. Then they start assigning tasks. Okay, you go and check the quality of this supplier. I'll go check the quality of the other guy and so forth. Let's meet in a couple of days and kind of, put all the information together. But at the end of the day, a week or two later, hopefully they have come up with one sole source that is going to be considered as primary source that is going to achieve all the features requirements of the design and project. And hopefully they have also come up with two, what they call second source suppliers, maybe a low tier supplier, a little bit low cost, maybe not such a tight tolerance, maybe slightly loose tolerance, not exactly same high quality standards compared to the first supplier, but yet, might be just okay if the tolerances are not so sensitive, can use the other two in case the first one has issues and or for cost cutting purpose. Unfortunately, you and I both know that at the beginning of the project, most teams are so busy, and that they actually don't go after second and third supplier. So they just come up with one supplier, right? You ever have that situation?
Yeah. Well, I mean, actually, on relatively small projects, they need to be quick with a small, there's a small budget and so on. I understand that, right?
Correct.
You can't, because all of that costs money because it takes time and people need to be paid, right? So I kind of understand that, but on relatively ambitious projects, yeah, that's really important. And then, so there's this sourcing work done, and then the supplier quality function should look at that with an eye primarily on critical suppliers, right? The expensive parts and the custom-made parts, right? So, that custom battery that's going to be expensive, the display, the PCBA, whatever, right? This camera module. Okay, we need to look into these things. For the toaster, the mechanical arm, the controller, and all these things. These are critical parts, and we need to make sure that we have the right supplier for that, right? The plastic enclosure, that's going to be custom made. Yeah, we need to make sure these guys know what they're doing, right? So they're going to have an eye primarily at these kinds of things, these parts, the suppliers of these parts, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I think that a lot of times, you said the key word, small company and big company. If you got a small company, you're dealing with certain kind of issues. For example, maybe not enough people to really understand what's involved in all aspects of the product development. So maybe, for example, two people are involved in starting a small company, and one of them is a mechanical engineer and the other one is a design engineer, electrical engineer. Well, there's no quality and reliability engineer there, right? So that's the drawback with a small company. In the big company, there's just too much going on, and usually each person has several projects. And so how they manage that project, how they prioritize those projects is going to be the problem sometimes. Here it is, one project is right at the initial stages and critically need those critical parts, like as you mentioned, displays, PCBs, enclosures, custom ID, and all kinds of little custom parts. But then at the same time, they need a lot of standard parts, and then standard parts, usually they're easily found in online, let's say databases and some of the suppliers online. But yet, if you've got a big company that doesn't really necessarily hire experienced individuals, maybe a junior level engineer, he may not know the difference between the standard and the custom, and or maybe he will
Mm.
go and order, custom parts in place of standard parts. And then nobody will know about it until kind of time has passed, a couple of months or two. And here it is, they're in the middle of like DVT, and then they find out that, wow, this is way too expensive.
Oh,
So,
oh yeah. You don't want to switch to another supplier, to another
yes,
source
right.
late in the
I don't
development
want
process,
to
right?
create in the
I think
process.
that's the key message here.
Exactly.
Hmm. Also, since you're talking about the design engineers and like the work done toward the beginning of a new product development project, it's also good to have quality help with that PRD that you mentioned, right? The product requirement document. And what I see very often is that design engineers and and the project manager and like the people who have sort of the concept in mind and the ideas about the product and so on. One thing they skip very often is the standards to that the supplier will have to abide by. So you know, very often people tell us, and we discussed this before in this podcast, right? People come to us and say, well, and I want this product to be like same quality as Apple products. Oh, wow. What does that even mean? I don't have the standard of Apple. How do I, make it a specific standard, right? Because you
Right.
don't know, like it means like zero defect. Okay, but if I take a microscope, I will always find some defects on an
That's right.
iPhone, like they're still inside their packaging. So what does that mean in specific terms? And that doesn't mean anything, doesn't lead
Right.
anywhere. Now, if you say you talk to a PCB supplier and you say, well, everything's fine if we specify, you know, IPC 610, whatever standard, right? There are standards for PCBA, for example, that give a list of typical defects and so on, right?
Right.
And you go to a, I don't know, plastic injection molding supplier and say, well, and the tolerance for this is going to be 0.1 mm, right? And for these parts and these parts, and the wall thickness and the way this long part is going to warp and okay, like that long part is should not deform by more than that much, that to more than that angle, and so on and so forth. It's
Right.
important to talk about these kind of things because the suppliers very often now, except if you work with really good sort of world-class suppliers that do put a lot of engineering in their sales process, right? And there are some of them, but chances are you don't want to pay the premium for these suppliers. Well, in that case, you have to do that work because somebody has to do that work, right? Otherwise, you expose yourself to all kinds of problems. And that's really something people don't understand about supplier quality management. Somebody's got to do that engineering work, right? If you don't
Absolutely.
work, yeah, if you don't work with world-class suppliers, you have to specify, the standard, and you have to ask the questions based on the risks of the design of the parts. That's especially important for custom parts, custom design parts. It's the first time they will make it, right? They
Right.
don't, I mean, the salesperson you're talking to, they have no idea what the potential issues are. So you got to step in and say, well, you got to make sure the tolerances are going to be like this and this and this, and we cannot see that kind of defect and so on. And you got to push them to think about it and estimate the probability and so on. And you're going to specify it. So if there's a problem, you can come back to them and say, hey, well, you promised that and you give us that. It's not good, right? Otherwise, you just go round and round like, oh, the customer doesn't like it. Oh, but you never told us that we think it's okay. What do you mean you think it's okay? Well, our other customers, they are very happy with that already. Oh, how do you respond to that?
Well, I think like just you made a good point. The expectations need to be aligned. If you are a very small company, one or two people, you got one small project, you don't have much experience with manufacturing, design. It's
Mm,
particularly like when it comes to, specific areas, like you mentioned, in terms of quality of a PCB or components or testing and reliability. Well, you can't go to a small manufacturing because those guys don't have specialized people. Those guys just have operators. Basically, they'll say, well, give me what you want me to do and we'll do it your way. So in that case, for a small company, it's best they go to slightly bigger manufacturing, although they're not going to be kind of respected as much because of the volumes, but still they'll be able to get a much better service because, those guys will know what exactly they're talking about and they'll design and manufacture exactly what they want. On the other hand, if
Well,
you're a bigger company, right, you
mm,
got people that are very, very experienced. And I think Nokia and Apple does that a lot. I'm talking about Nokia that is gone. But they used to do that a lot. They used to go
mm,
for a very small factory that had everything that they needed, except that they just were lacking some of the know-how and technology. And then the Apple guys who were extremely experienced, they would actually help them grow with Apple. On the other hand, they would get an amazing price on those parts. So, and the volumes.
mm,
So it's kind of a give and take relationship. If you're a small company and then you go to for example, a company that, uh, is not even as big as our company. We have all kinds of engineers that cover roughly pretty much complete design, from scratch. And then we do all kinds of reliability testing, quality testing. We do inspections. We do the whole full gamut of what is needed to develop this product from end to end, all the way to your customer, right? But there are lots of Chinese suppliers that better than I do that they don't have all that services. And they just want to basically you give it to them and they just build a PCB and put it in the enclosure and they say, here you go.
right, right. So for the record, yeah, depending on the production volumes, because the contract manufacturing subsidiary, it goes up and down. We're somewhere between 200 and 300. So yeah, I mean, you mentioned something really important is that small companies, yeah, will have to approach that in a certain way. It's really difficult for them to go to a big supplier
Correct.
and get direct access to a good project manager who will be able to listen to them and give them advice and get some feedback from specialized engineering resources inside the big company, because very often it's very compartmentalized also within that big company, so not one person will be able to tell you everything. It's tough. You're not going to have the A team, right? The A team works with their biggest customers,
That's
and
right.
yeah, so that it's always tough. Now there are mid-sized, suppliers of machining processes, etc., etc., that do sell some engineering content. And again, there's a premium of an extra 50% maybe based against, let's say, relatively similar products um, on the Chinese markets, right? There's often a big premium. But again, if it's a very critical part and it doesn't, how to say, it's not a big part of the cost of the full product, might be worth it. It might be
Right.
very well, very, very much worth it. So anyway, let's get to the second part of this podcast episode. Actually, is how to qualify a supplier, right? For quality, right? And the first thing is usually some initial due diligence, right? Maybe, I mean, actually from a first call and maybe reviewing the website or the whatever Alibaba page and so on, it's already possible to see a lot of information, right? And to sort of just to say no, not like these guys don't look like they have even the right profile, right? So
You're right.
yeah, if you give, and that's what we do, like for the initial stages, in the sourcing stages, just having the right form, the right template uh, for the uh, for the sourcing person to go through it, and collect the right information. You already have an initial feel for you know, whether this is a risky supplier or not. Uh, and 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 already from there you have a first taste of the supplier, right? And this is very, very, very common to say, well, pretty clear that this one is like head and shoulder over the others. Just
Yeah. I agree.
just
And
by
I think
collecting
that,
a bit of information. Mhm.
yeah, I agree. And I think that what I was going to talk about in terms of like, we're talking about, I think, supplier selection, right? So the
Mm.
first step is that the team actually need to understand what kind of a supplier do they need. Like you said,
Yes.
low tier, high tier, what kind of a size of the supplier, what kind of, for example, capacity they should have. And then on the other hand, they need to know, for example, what kind of criteria is for that supplier in terms of, quality development, reliability testing, and, financial stability, technical expertise. All these things need to be evaluated in terms of criteria. Next thing to do is you start looking for that type of supplier that you were looking for, within that criteria. And once you have found maybe one or two or three, depending on the need, then you start sending them RFQs, right? Is that how it works? Basically, you send uh, proposals in
It
terms of
very
it.
much depends. Yeah, very
Yeah,
much depends because if it's for a
right,
custom design part, there's some intellectual property that you don't want to spread around too much, right? So
correct.
in that case, you spend longer on the supplier screening, let's say,
Valid. Yeah,
to get down
right,
to one or two. And by the way, just last week, Kate was on the podcast and she talked about, the general sourcing process. So maybe we don't need to go much in depth into it, but let's say there's a supplier, they kind of look good
right,
um, on paper, right? Then typical type of due diligence, if it's a Chinese supplier, well,
right,
first, is what they say actually true? There's some websites in China, you can go there like tianyuancha.com and so on. They actually, by the way, that you can only access if you are in mainland China.
right.
Um, um, I don't even remember if he works in Hong Kong. Yeah, he might work in Hong Kong.
Hmm.
But basically, you have to be in China, otherwise you can't. But you can
Right,
see a lot of information about the suppliers. The actual amount of capital, whether they are actually authorized to do manufacturing. Otherwise, what is that? Just a trading company? What is it that they're doing, right?
right.
What kind of products they are authorized to work on? Uh, these types of things, right? If they
Which
see
is
that they have a
amazing,
lot of,
right? Basically, everything you need all in your
yeah,
fingertips,
who are the owners? If they say
right?
they have very strong R&D and they develop their own products,
Financial, maybe
okay.
some customers.
No, you cannot see that, but you can see, for example, how many patents and trademarks they have
Yes,
registered. Um, so if it makes sense in the context of an ODM supplier
right,
that has a lot of R&D people and so on and develop their own products, okay, that makes sense. That supports the claim. Otherwise, it might look like they're stealing like registering, intellectual property that actually belongs to their customers. So it
right.
could go both ways, right? Sometimes you suspect, you're wondering. Uh,
That's
so so that's the type of due diligence you can do. You can also do a credit report check. This is not just about China, but you can sometimes get a glimpse at, you know, their amount of sales and even
right,
debt
right,
and so on. But in China, very often these numbers are very wrong. That's what they declare to the government
right,
because they want to pay much tax and they might have a lot of other debt and so on. So it's kind of limited, of course. You need to take it with a grain of salt. So that's the initial due diligence. But then very fast, at least for the critical component suppliers, is really, really important to go on site, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes you have some big surprises.
Another topic in the same line. So when would you, in your opinion, do the audit?
If it's going to be a supplier that's really central to your project,
Right.
as early as possible, I would say. Otherwise, you might waste a lot of time
I agree.
sort of building your product around their module, and that that's really a shame, right? And then you go there and then you say, "Oh crap, it's like three guys in an apartment actually, or something like that." We can't build that whole project around them, right?
Well, I think
Or
custom
like
parts. custom parts, in order to,
Yeah, in
um,
general.
yeah,
Right.
in general, that's the ones that you definitely want to audit because you want to make sure they have the
Mm,
process capability, technical know-how, and then they can actually test the parts the way you want. And then for sure, you want to make sure that they can handle the volumes that you need and maybe if they can expand or not, expansion,
yeah,
expanding the lines and so
exactly.
forth. Yeah.
Hmm. Basically, there's two things. Yeah, there's two topics. What can they do, and what is
Right.
the risk, right?
Exactly.
The,
Yeah.
can they help design, develop the product, or just that module that we're going to use, or just that part? Can they actually give us some good engineering advice, or like we'll have to spoon feed them, and we just like hire them to work on
Yeah.
totally under our direction, right? Um, and can they, yeah, exactly what you say. Yeah, can they make the right volume? Can they test with their own equipment? Can they do this? Can they do that? And then on the risk side is okay. Um, what's the risk that they might completely mess up a production, right? Do they do they
Exactly.
have do they have the quality staff to actually manage the standard that will tell them that they have to follow? Will they actually
Right.
even understand it? People are, how's their English, right?
No,
Is it
you're
just the
absolutely right. And I
salesperson?
think you said the key word, quality standards, QMS, and the fact that, in their lines, they have quality control people and teams that are skilled in what they do. They have experience and they know how to catch quality issues. Quality issues are something that it really mostly comes with experience. It's not so much written down somewhere that, what kind of for example, gap size is acceptable. But once you've been in that industry for a while, you almost know it, but you can just see it and know it that it's not meeting the requirement. And once you get
Mm,
the gap analysis done and you go and look at it, then you'll see that you were right. So I totally agree with you on that. I mean, all of those little details need to be addressed when you are doing the supplier audit with a whole
mm.
collection of teams, right? You got a member from engineering, you got a member from quality.
Ideally,
Yeah,
for a big
exactly.
project, for
Right,
a
for a
big
big
project,
project. Exactly. We're
definitely
talking
worth.
medium to big project. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Small
For a
projects
smaller
can't afford
project,
any of those. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, for a
totally.
smaller project, it just doesn't make sense to have that
No,
kind of budget. So
no,
like a half a day visit or a day visit by one
right,
person looking at some specific points in their quality system, that, and the rest can be done on a video call, like checking the engineering capabilities and things like that. That can be
right.
done through a video call in half an hour already to gauge it. But yeah, you mentioned QMS, quality management system. That's really critical. There's still
Yes,
a lot of suppliers in China that have paperwork just for decoration. And they say, we are 9001 certified and also 13485 and 16949 and blah, blah,
right,
blah, blah,
right,
blah. Like even AS 9100, like we even
right,
do aerospace and blah, 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 blah. Uh, and, and the gullible buyers, some of them very smart, but I've seen a lot
right,
of companies fall for that. They say, oh, wow, this is amazing. This company is like so good.
right,
But you don't even know the name of the certifying company. How do you call it? CB, certifying
right.
body. Yeah, it's not.
Exactly.
It's like a Chinese company that doesn't care. Will sell you the certificate, right? As long as a consultant fits them the right papers and says the right things. As a Chinese company, you can get any of these certificates relatively easily. Okay, especially the very general ones like 9001, 14001. I mean, it's so easy to get them, right? And you have so many options of certification bodies that will sort of close one eye and and close their mouth and just say, okay, that's fine. All the paperwork is in order. You get it. You can put it on your wall, right? So quality management system, you actually need to dig a little bit into it very fast. You have a sense. Is it Is it a company that just has the paperwork for decoration, or are they really leaving their system? And then if they're leaving their system, okay, is it properly implemented? Okay, that's really also very important.
I was going to say something else that I have
Mhm.
noticed when I used to do at my time doing supply audits. Some of the things that was overlooked a lot was reviewing the supplier documentation. There's a lot of stuff that
Mm.
you won't know unless you actually get into those documents. Ask, for
Mm.
example, can I see your component qualification test
Mm.
document? When was that? What part did you test and qualify? And they'll say this one. Was
Yeah.
it? Can I see the documentation? And you get to see a whole lot of information. You see how good they are in terms of how in terms of actual testing, how many samples they're doing. If any of them that makes any kind of a sense, then you start realizing, if this company has a certain credibility. Then it comes to, of
Yeah.
course, inspection. And I think that we do a lot of that with our division, right?
Hmm.
And all of
Understood.
supplier
Yeah.
inspection.
Hmm.
And how many issues we find there with some of the companies. You could be doing that during the audit, just a small inspection. Go through the line and just look and see how they're doing for example,
Yes.
pick and place or
Yes.
assembly process. You get to learn a
Yes.
lot. And then, of course,
Yes.
observing the entire process, like how the management is taking care of you as a customer, and how many people are really knowledgeable, how many of them are speaking English, how many of them do in the meeting really understand what you're talking about as a customer. I think that's all extremely important. And in a process audit, basically you're invited there to visit that supplier and get to know them. And there's a lot you can find out if you could one thing I noticed that sometimes when I did the process audit, I would see some areas closed and they would take you like a kind of movie alley. We go this way and come back that way. Well, can I go this way? No, we can't go that way.
It's very scripted sometimes. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
exactly.
So these are the on-site audits. Yeah, at the beginning, and then you keep going, maybe once a year to see if there's any issues, right? And
Exactly.
then you want to sort of formalize which suppliers actually have been approved, right? Just to make sure that there's some kind of guardrail against using a supplier that has not been qualified.
Exactly.
And we see some companies doing prototypes, and then they get, okay, this is our final prototype, like we're ready to go into making the tooling and then manufacturing. And we're like,
Right.
okay, we're like, where's the bomb? And they say, oh, what do you mean the bomb? Oh, the list of suppliers. Oh, for the parts, list of parts and their suppliers. Oh, and
Right.
and and then they give us like a link to Taobao or AliExpress or something like that.
Right.
Oh, like, oh, okay, well, you are not that close to manufacturing, because these guys sent you 5 samples that you use for your prototypes, but
Right.
who's behind these guys? Where is it made? What do you know about them? Can they make 10,000 pieces good? Are you sure? Right?
Exactly.
So at one point, you have to force project managers and everybody to work with qualified suppliers, again, for the custom parts, for the very expensive parts and so on, right? It's very important to have an approved supplier list and to use it.
Yeah, I mean, and in some cases they call it AVL, approved the
Mm.
supplier list. Some other places they call it something else. But what matters
Mm.
is that you have a database of approved suppliers based on certain criteria that you can, maybe try, maybe you can score them like, tier one and tier two and tier three, and this way you have an idea of how you can negotiate in terms of cost delivery and how much
Mm.
risk you're taking on each, how much confidence you have on their quality, on their delivery, and all of those
Mm.
things are important. And I think that one of the things that is important is I don't know if you remember, we used to do that very regularly, quarterly supplier meeting. And that's when you actually rank each supplier based on their performance for the whole quarter. I think that's very, very important task.
Yeah, again, for projects of a certain size, definitely
Yeah,
makes sense to put the resources on
absolutely.
this
For
and
medium
manage the
to long
suppliers.
progress. Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. Is yeah, super important. It's really money well spent, and then like tracking some key metrics of performance
Yep,
and
yep,
feeding that back to the supplier, and getting their feedback on it, and
exactly.
putting pressure on those that are not doing too good, and maybe like requesting them to come for a formal meeting to put
Yeah,
pressure on their GM and so on and so forth. Yeah, there's a
exactly.
lot of things, and I think we're kind of out of time for this episode.
Yeah,
But
right. That's
there's
a
a lot of
major, yeah, right.
right. There's a lot of things like the ongoing supplier quality
And I think
management.
that you're right. Those are for suppliers with volumes probably over 100,000 a month. So yeah, I mean, for smaller suppliers, 5,000, 10,000 a month, you probably don't need to do that. In fact, most of our suppliers are somewhere between 50,000 to 100,000, and we qualify them internally. But for uh, smaller companies, before they come to us, they need to have some kind of a, approved vendor list. Like you said, they need to have a BOM with the suppliers
Mm.
that are already approved by them. Otherwise, we have to do the work for them, which we will
Yeah,
charge.
we'll do the work, which is fine, but again, that's time, and time
Exactly.
doesn't come free.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, that was full of good advice. Thanks, Andrew, and I hope that
Absolutely.
the listeners could take something away from this episode. So thanks again, thanks Andrew, and thanks everybody for tuning in. And you'll hear from us next week as usual.
Thanks again for listening to this podcast brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share, because it will really help others discover us too.